Hi everyone, my name is Professor Warren and today we're going to be talking about exploring, planning, and drafting your paper. Now, everything that we talk about is incredibly crucial in this video, so I really highly recommend that you take notes in your journal as well as come back to this video multiple times throughout the semester because everything that we cover in here is going to be sort of the foundation to sort of the house we're going to be building throughout the semester. So these tips that I'm going to be going over on how to go through the writing process, how to plan your papers, how to draft them, what a thesis statement is. These are all crucial. So please pay attention. We're going to go through these, but it shouldn't be anything too insane. So let's keep going. All right. So when we talk about the writing process, which is the process you do when you're writing, everybody has sort of a different process that they do. And the process that I'm talking about today, you don't have to do one-to-one, but it's important to kind of put a name to the thing that you're doing. So we all have a set baseline about what it is that we're talking about. However, there are some better ways to do the writing process, and there are some ways that, could be improved. So when we talk about the writing process, what I mean is sort of when you're exploring topics, when you're planning your paper, and when you're drafting. The exploring process is what we call pre-writing because it's the stuff you do before you write, as well as planning is often the pre-writing stage, though you may be jotting notes. But this is before you're actually writing the content of your paper. So again, some of the basic steps of the writing process in its most simplistic terms is exploring your topic, planning your paper, and then actually drafting the paper. So exploring the paper, let me move myself out of the way. So when you're in the exploring stage, this is when you're choosing a topic to talk about. Now again, you will, for the first paper, have a very set topic that you have to do, but as we progress throughout the semester, you will have more of a choice on what to do in terms of your paper topic, especially for the final paper where you essentially can choose whatever you want within a few parameters. But in the exploring stage, you're trying to choose your topic. I always recommend to students that they should choose something that can hold their interest, because as you're working through the writing process, and if you really aren't invested in your topic, it makes it very difficult to write said topic. So I really highly recommend that you choose something that you are at least interested in. Now, you may not, some of you have already explained to me, well, I don't like writing, I don't enjoy it. Well, at least find something that you're interested in, and then it hopefully will help to gear you towards wanting to write it more. This is what we often call writer's fatigue. It's when, we're writing so much that we just get sick and tired of what it is that we're writing. So if you have something that can hold your interest, that'll help you to get through this paper. When you're in the exploring stage, here are some ways that you can find a topic that you would like to do. The first one is brainstorming. So that's when, and you've probably read this in the reading, but brainstorming is when you're just coming up with various ideas that you like, and maybe you're writing them down in sort of a cloud, or maybe you're listing them out, or maybe you're sort of making connections to those ideas. Say I want to talk about a paper about global warming, and so maybe I put global warming in the center of my paper, and then I write some topics about various issues related to global warming and see what connections can be made, what things may interest me within that topic. So physically being able to see something really helps people versus just trying to do it in your head. The next one is free writing, which we do at the beginning of almost every single class, and that is essentially you're just writing what's on your mind. Now, the free writings we do in class, they're a little bit more formalized, but true free writing is when you take, say, your cell phone, and then you set a timer for 10 minutes. And within that 10 minutes, you just write whatever is in your head. You don't go back and check for grammar or spelling. You just get all those ideas out in one setting, in sort of one fell swoop. And so some people can really think through ideas if they're not hindered by, I got to be grammatically correct, or I got to focus and make sure that these things make sense. Just get it out and then read back over it after the 10 minutes. See what maybe you were thinking of and how it could be improved, or ways you could maybe add on to those ideas, things like that. So free writing can help people to really just get the idea down instead of worrying about what it is they're saying. You can also doodle. A lot of students like to, doodle or draw while they're thinking through ideas. So physically doing something, moving your hand might help you. I know personally when I was in college, while I would take notes, if we were in a stage where I didn't have to take notes and I really just kind of needed to listen, I would always usually draw on the side of my paper. And that didn't mean I wasn't paying attention, but my hand needed to be doing something while I thought through complex ideas. So if that's something that you're like, that's totally me, that could be something to do. And then there's clustering, similar to like in the brainstorming category. You have a topic and then you cluster ideas around it, and then you break those ideas into smaller ideas and you see how things connect. That's sort of clustering. Another thing you can do in the exploring stage is just to ask questions. People have really good ideas that you may not have considered. So you can ask myself about maybe the topics you would like to talk about, your classmates, a friend, a family member. Asking questions is one of the best things to do. Just go around, ask people that you trust and say, hey, I'm thinking through these ideas, or hey, I would like to do something about this topic. What are some ideas that maybe you have, or what do you think might be interesting? Those are some ways to explore your topic. But once you've explored your topic and you kind of have an idea of what you want to say, at this point, you should work on your working thesis statement. And there is a difference. What we'll talk about is a working thesis versus an actual thesis statement. But a working thesis is essentially your main argument, but it's not fully formed. There's still some wiggle room to make it better, but it's enough to be able to then get you to start writing or to get you to start researching. So a working thesis statement, again, is not enough to develop a clear single focus, but it is enough to get you to start doing some work. And there are some specific things you want to keep in mind when you're making a working thesis. The first one is make sure, again, it's interesting to yourself and your intended audience. Try to make it as specific as you can. Again, if you're doing, say, a topic on global warming and you say, okay, I want to do my paper on the climate issues related to monarch butterflies, that's pretty specific. You probably could get a little bit more specific in terms of like, did you want to talk about extinction, breeding rates, whatever, but that's specific enough. You could start doing research into really what you want to talk about when it comes to monarch butterflies, and then make sure it's manageable. Again, this is one thing students really suffer with. They'll tell me, oh, I want to do a paper on sexism. And that's okay, but it's not manageable, right? Sexism exists in various different facets of society, and it's a super complex issue. So you have to then make it a little bit more narrow. So just make sure when you're coming up with your ideas and you try to set a working thesis that you make it interesting, that you make it specific, and that you make sure that it's manageable, right? It's not too large and it's not too small either. Then we have a thesis statement. A thesis statement is now the actual argument. It's cleaned, it's polished, it's what the paper is going to be about. And it's similar to a working thesis, but there are some differences. So in the reading that I gave you, you may have saw that a working thesis statement will have a topic and a comment, right? You have your main focus for your paper, and then you have something that you want to say about it. A thesis statement has that topic, right, the main focus, some comment you want to say about it, but usually it will have some main claims, right, something that is in support of that argument, specific elements that you are going to use to justify that position. And again, for traditional college essay, you usually will have 3 main points, but you can definitely only have maybe 2 or 1 or 4 or 5 or whatever. It depends on sort of the length and complexity of your paper. But let's look at this one, for example, right? So a thesis statement has a topic, a comment on your topic, and then main claims. And here I have color-coded them so it's easier to see. So let's look at this example. When reflecting on my current writing abilities, I would say that they have been largely shaped by my 3rd grade teacher and when I had to enter the North Academy writing contest. So here, the topic of that paper is their writing abilities, right? At the very bare bones of it all, it is about their writing abilities. And again, the topic of your thesis statement should be 1 to 2 sentences. It's not the comment, it's solely, if I was to strip away all this extra stuff, what is the main focus? What is at the core? And at the core, this paper is about their writing abilities. Then they have a comment right after that they say about their writing abilities, right? Their writing abilities have been largely shaped by. That's their comment on their topic. And again, the comment doesn't always have to come right after the topic. Sometimes your comment may come before the topic, but just make sure that you can identify your topic, you can identify some comment you're making about your topic, and then that we see in pink, 3rd grade teacher, and the writing contest, those are going to be the main claims. Those are going to be what's in the body paragraphs that supports that topic and that comment. So if we were to have just a working thesis, it would look like, when reflecting on my current writing abilities, I would say they have been largely changed, right? Maybe that was what the student started with, and then they thought more deeply about what changed their writing abilities. And then they were like, okay, really my third grade teacher and that writing contest I had to do, that really changed my writing abilities. So now they have a clear thesis statement. So I would expect after their introduction, when they give their thesis statement, that the first body paragraph will be about how their third grade teacher impacted their writing abilities, and then how that writing contest impacted their abilities. So that's sort of a thesis statement. It's the main argument, it's the crux of this paper, and it identifies the major things that will be discussed in this paper. One thing to note is that the thesis statement should always be located towards the end of the introductory paragraph or the introductory section. It depends. For longer papers, you may have a few paragraphs in your introduction, but it should roughly be located in towards the bottom of either the introduction or introductory section. And that's because the thesis statement is like a springboard into your paper, right? When you jump into the pool, you go from the diving board into the pool. The diving board is the last thing you hit before you jump into the water. It gives you an idea of how you got into the water, right? I jumped on the diving board, I got into the water. The thesis statement is the same thing, right? I have this major idea, and now everything after that should be based on that major idea. So I always tell students, I notice some students will put the thesis statement at the beginning of the paragraph, of the introductory paragraph. But one thing to consider is, do you think your audience is going to remember it by the time they're done reading the introduction? So make sure, it's always a good writing move just to put it. So let's look at some more examples of a working thesis versus a thesis statement. So here we have a working thesis where Fayetteville State University should not move to a 4-day work week. Now, we know that the topic of this paper is FSU because everything about this paper should be about FSU. And our comment about FSU is that it should not move to a 4-day work week. So that student has a topic, their topic is the university, and then their comment about it is that it should not move to a 4-day work week. And this would give the student enough to be able to start doing research into why they think that. And then once they come up with some major reasons as to why they think this is the case, then they move on to their thesis statement. So FSU should not move to a 4-day work week because increasing student workloads on Mondays through Thursdays will make it difficult for them to excel in their studies, will impact their extracurricular activities, and will not save the institution enough money to justify such an action. So they still have their topic and they have their comment, but now they have 3 main claims. The first one is because it will increase the student's workload, which will make it difficult for them to excel. That's one main claim. The second main claim will be that it'll impact their extracurricular activities. And then the third one will be it won't save the school any money anyway. So I would expect this student, after I read that thesis statement, the first body paragraph or section should be about that a 4-day work week makes it difficult for students to excel in their studies. And then the second one should be about extracurricular activities. And the third one should be about saving money or the lack thereof. So once that you have a thesis statement, right, you've explored your topic, you kind of come up with maybe a working thesis and then moved into a thesis statement. Now you can start to plan your paper. How is it going to look? And some of the most common outlines are very simple. You have your introductory section, you have body paragraph 1, 2, 3, and conclusion. And some people like to do this. They like just a very bare bones outline where they'll write these on their paper and then sort of fill in the blank. Now you can do that, and I've noticed some students do that, but it is a little lackluster. I prefer one a little bit more specific. That one works for me, especially in college when you want to make sure all your pieces align like a nicely put together puzzle. I would recommend sort of this outline. Now again, you might notice that I only have 1 body paragraph. Just keep in mind the other body paragraphs, however many you decide to have, will have sort of the same the same, I guess, details in it. For the sake of brevity, I just showed you one. So in your introduction, you should have some opening lines, write something that grabs your reader's attention. I'm sure you've heard about that in high school, but it really should be something that would capture them. That could be an interesting fact, a statistic, maybe something your audience didn't consider. Find something that you could open the paper with that would be engaging for someone to read. And then start talking about like your topic, right? If we were talking about the 4-day work week, you may want to, in your introduction, say in your opening line, did you know that so-and-so amount of universities run on a 4-day work week? Many people in America think that this might be the way that all universities should run, according to blah, 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 right? Have something that kind of opens it up, and then start working into your thesis statement. After that, you'll have your body paragraph. Again, the topic of that body paragraph should be the first main claim, and you want to make sure you follow your main claims in order. If you put them out of order, it could confuse your audience, especially with larger papers. So it should be that first main claim. And again, have an opening line that clearly states this is the first main claim. So you could do something like, one major reason I think FSU should not move to a 4-day work week is that it'll burden students' academic success, or something along those lines. Then have that clear topic sentence. Again, tie it sort of back to your argument. Have some first supporting detail. This would be any research that you would pull or anything to support your argument. You should then elaborate on how that evidence you pulled helps to contribute to your argument or provide context, because sometimes when you pull evidence from something else, you're losing that context because you're taking a small section from a larger work. So after you pull your evidence to support your claim for that body paragraph, either if you think it's self-explanatory, then just elaborate on how it supports your idea, or if you think that it needs some context, give it some context. I always recommend students to pull another supporting detail in their paragraph because, again, this is a college level paper. And if you're making an argument, you should have another source to support you. So have two major sources that are different that could support you, and then elaborate, and then have those final thoughts and transition. And you do roughly those moves for every body paragraph. And then you move into your conclusion where you have your opening line, you restate your thesis, you don't copy and paste it, you rephrase it in a new way. And then you summarize your findings and your conclusions, right? What should we take away? Why does this matter? Why should I listen to what you have to say? Overall, after hearing all this, what should I take away from this? And then either just some ending statements, maybe sort of thanking your audience for reading the paper, or have them do some call to action, especially if you want your audience to then, after reading that, do an action. So that's up to you. The conclusion, as long as you're sort of summarizing and giving us and reminding us what purpose this paper served and why we should have cared about it, you should be good for your conclusion. Storyboarding can be useful as well. So maybe you're looking at this and you think that this may not work for you. Storyboarding might, if you're someone who's more of a visual learner, you can do what's called storyboarding, where you have a set of, these aren't note cards, but you can use Post-it notes if you'd like to. And maybe you write some of these major things that we talked about here onto your sticky notes, maybe your thesis, your main topics. Maybe you write like a quote from something you would like to use, or put, I would like to use the TED Talk video from blah, blah, blah. And then you can take these and physically move them around. There have been, I don't typically do this, but there was one time there was a paper, it was very complex, and to be able to visually see it on my whiteboard and then move it around instead of having to type it up, and then you've got all this text that you're trying to, put in some logical order, and it's hard, especially when you're writing like 40 pages. But if you're a visual learner, maybe storyboarding might be useful to you. So something to consider. You don't always have to type out an outline. Maybe doing something physically on a board or on the floor of your room, like have your note cards out and move them around, could be helpful to you. And now, once you've got it sort of planned and laid out, now it's actually time to do the writing. And remember, when you're developing your paragraphs, right, each of your paragraphs should have unity, development, and coherence. So what do I mean by that? Unity, again, everything should tie back into your thesis. So make sure that it is clear in that body paragraph somewhere how this relates back to your thesis. That's why you should always have that topic sentence at the beginning of a paragraph, or in the first 2 sentences of each body paragraph, where it very clearly makes that connection. You don't have to be very explicit and say, one reason I think blah, 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 though you could do that. It could just simply be something like, if we're using the 4-day work week, for example, it simply could just be something like, students may not consider how a 4-day work week will impact their academic success. Again, very clearly we read that from the thesis that was going to be the main point, and that is clear here. You very clearly put that major point in the beginning, and we were able to make that connection. So whether you want to be very explicit or very implicit, it's up to you, but it should be recognizable that this is related to your thesis. I like to think of your topic sentence, the sentence at the beginning of every paragraph, almost like a diet thesis, right? Where it's not the thesis, but it's got the makings of a thesis, right? It's sort of diet, like Diet Coke, right? It's not Coke, but it tastes like Diet Coke, right? Hopefully, I don't know, I don't drink soda. But again, make sure you have a clear topic sentence that'll help you to develop some unity in your paper. And then make sure you have good development. Again, you want to take your ideas from just very general ideas to more specific ideas. You want to make sure you have evidence that justifies your points and gets more specific than your initial claim. That's why you shouldn't start with a very broad topic, like say sexism in the US, because now you're going to have to get very specific in your body paragraphs, and there's no way you could cover the entire history of sexism in a 1 paragraph, 4-page paper. There's no way you could do that. So you want to make sure that, you get more specific into your body paragraph. So if your thesis is already narrowed down and rather specific, your body paragraphs can then hone in more on those topics. So make sure you find a good balance from going from just general statements to more specific statements. And then coherence. This is just making sure that all your details fit together and that it flows. That's why in the outline that I showed you, that's one major way that's effective in outlining your paper. Have a topic sentence, pull evidence, elaborate on how that evidence helps you, maybe pull some additional evidence, do the same moves, and then tie it up, right? Some final thoughts, overall, how does this help you? And then sort of transition to the next idea. But we can also talk about coherence in terms of parallel structures, which is making sure that sort of the verbs and things like first person, second person, third person, they remain coherent throughout the paper. So like, for instance, I got this example here. Mary likes to hike, to swim, and to ride a bicycle, right? Each of these are have their own coherence, right? To hike, to swim, and to ride a bicycle. They all follow the same parallel structure. Now, if you wanted to break that parallel structure, you would do something like at this last bullet point where it says Mary likes hiking, swimming, and to ride a bicycle, right? Each of these verbs have ing, but that one doesn't. And the reason you don't want to do that is, number one, it sticks out like a sore thumb, right? And you may say, well, who cares, right? It does kind of matter because, again, your audience may focus on this one and they may say, this one's different. And maybe this one's more important. And if that's not the case, if you think that, say you're Mary and you think these are all equally important, then having it kind of stick out like this defeats sort of the purpose of your message. Your audience is going to focus more on that. And when they get to that, they may be like, well, it didn't seem like that one was different. So what was the deal? So it's good to have good parallel structures. This helps to keep your audience engaged, as well as it doesn't have them sort of come up with their own sort of interpretations for your paper. So again, make sure everything is coherent, right? That everything makes a logical sense. I introduce a thing, I pull evidence, I elaborate, I wrap it up, I move on. Coherence, again, if I have these 3 main claims in my thesis, they follow that order in my paper. My conclusion restates that thesis. It gives the audience a reason as to why this paper matters. And the verbs in which I use, or maybe the tense, right, first person, second person, third person, follows throughout the paper. So my audience isn't confused on maybe who's speaking or if other things are more important than others. So make sure that you have good unity, development, and coherence. And that's really all I've got for you guys. Hopefully you took something away from today. This is very important. Now, for this first paper, you may not really have to outline too much. It's more of a creative writing assignment. It's more for me to see how you're writing, if you're able to do basic unity, development, coherence. You should have somewhat of a thesis statement in your literacy narrative, because you should have sort of a major idea for this paper. So this first paper will really be practicing on how you write, gives me an idea of how you write, creating a thesis statement, right, about your literacy narrative. How has your literacy been shaped? What things shaped your literacy narrative? So I will be looking for a thesis statement. I will be looking for clear body paragraphs, and I will be looking for you to make these moves. So make sure that you've taken notes, that you understand these things. If you have any questions, please feel free to come talk to me. I do not mind going through this again and helping you to understand